The year is 1981, and we are following the crew of the spaceship Dorf 1 on a mission to find a valuable gem known as the Blue Star. We meet Galaxina, a beautiful yet somewhat naive android played by the late Dorothy Stratten, who assists the crew while developing emotions and exploring her human-like qualities. This film is a mix of satire and campy humor, poking fun at the tropes of classic sci-fi films like Star Wars and 2001: A Space Odyssey. Despite its low budget and cheesy special effects, Galaxina has become a cult classic due to its offbeat humor, unique premise, and Stratton's iconic performance. While it wasn't a commercial success, it remains a nostalgic gem for fans of 1980s sci-fi and exploitation cinema. This week on Back the Balcony, we're watching Galaxina. Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert, two titans of cinematic review. Sometimes right, sometimes wrong, but always captivating. Your hosts Antonio of the Cult-Worthy Cinema Podcast and Justin Henson of the Movie Wire are here to take you back to the balcony. Oh boy, I miss March. We had some great conversations in March. We talked about some great musicals, and I thought I was going to hate March because I hate musicals. And so far, we've watched two mediocre at best films in our quest to find those hidden gems that we've discovered in the Siskel and Ebert reviews. Movies that we hadn't heard of, movies that maybe we were familiar with the poster, but not the movie itself. Last week we did Blink, which was like a forgettable 90s thriller. And now we have 1980s Galaxina, a movie that I picked because I was expecting to see boobies, and there were no boobies. How disappointing.
At first I thought this was revenge, that you did see this movie and you wanted to piss me off so bad because I brought Newsies to March. And I have to tell you, it has been a while since I looked at an old movie and I was just infuriated with just pure annoyance. This movie, I couldn't stand. I hated it. And I had to rewatch it. This movie pissed me off to the extent I almost fell out of my chair with my eyes rolling in the back of my head. I love you, but I hate you for this watch.
Well, dude, I've never seen this movie either. It was just one of those picks of things that we had never seen. We wanted to discover new films, and this was one of them. The interesting thing about this movie, and the reason why I picked it for one, is how many movies have we covered now that Siskel and Ebert didn't watch or didn't review on their show? And this ended up on their show. Yeah, it's 1980/81. So it's kind of earlier in their days on TV, but still, like Captain Ron, they didn't review. Ernest Goes to Camp, they didn't review. Like, we really have had some great films slip through the fingers of Siskel and Ebert, yet they put this on their show. I don't even know what to say about it. Except for the fact I kind of appreciate it a little bit more than I did before. I'm not saying I like it, but some of those things, some of those one-liners, some of those quips, and some of those moments, they kind of stuck with me to the point where I had to go back onto YouTube and just watch select moments. I didn't watch it twice like you, but we'll get into it. First of all, what are your thoughts of this getting covered on their show? Like, how did they choose this? What studio paid them to put this on their show?
It's one thing that this ended up on their show. It must have been a slow movie week. I know when I review movies and it's slow, I have to kind of really deep dive into streaming to really put a movie on my show. But at the same time, this was hot at the time of its release. You have the space aspect of it. You had Star Wars, aliens, everything that's going trying to replicate this formula. And at this time, this was the comedy parody of it. So I get the appeal to it, but at the same time, I have more of a problem with the review than I do with the movie, and we'll get
Mhm.
into that later, but that has to be one of those aspects where even I'm tempted on putting on my show what's hot now instead of focusing on what's unknown.
So I think one of the main reasons why this probably ended up on their show is because of the whole Dorothy Stratten situation. So this came out in June of 1980, just briefly before she was murdered by her ex-husband. Now, we've already talked about Bob Fosse on this show with all that jazz. The film that he made after that was Star 80, which had Eric Roberts and Mariel Hemingway, who played Dorothy Stratten in that and kind of told the Hollywood version of what happened to her. That movie does not mention this movie at all, the making of it. It focuses more on her relationship with Peter Bogdanovich and all the things that went on with them. But I think because this was sadly commercialized based on her death, see Dorothy Stratton's last movie. That's probably what got it on the show, was the hype for that. It feels kind of cringe that that was the case, but it's the only reason why I could even think they would cover this, because the only other big star, big in quotation marks, is Avery Schreiber, who I mostly just knew from TV shows of the 70s and The Muppet Show. Funny guy, one liners, whatever. He's like the poor man's Dom DeLuise, in my opinion. And he's got some funny moments in this movie, and that's where this movie pissed me off. We rarely talk about the movies while we're watching them. And I told you that I was kind of struggling to get through it, but that I thought I might be in for a treat with like that first 20 minutes because I didn't know this was a spoof. This is like an airplane kind of wannabe or a Hot Shots, a Zaz type production, just not as good and not as funny, but it was doing some clever things in theory. In practice, it sucks balls, but I could tell where they were going with it, so I thought I was in for a good time. But at the end of the day, what this felt like to me was this was like a space porno that someone wrote, like a spoofy one, like the Flesh Gordon movie back in the day, but without the sex scenes. It's like they wrote a full on space porno and then took all of the pornography out and just left the bare bones of it. That's what it felt like to me. How about you?
Same, 100%, because Dorothy Stratton, this is most of her career was in 79, where she tried to be recognized as an actress. She tried to get into the industry and ignore the Playboy aspect of it or the porno
Mhm.
aspect of it. And, you know, with me, I tried to do research on the actress, and most of the stuff is about a 30-second to a minute, 45-minute clips, but she does a decent job here when it comes to analyzing the material, but she's still a sex symbol. This was the time of being a sex symbol in movies. So, given her want to be an actress, she was in the beginning wrong profession because she was seen as an object. And that's what this
Mhm.
movie really was you can take the fun latex mask the characters, the over the done characters, but at the end of the day, it's all about Dorothy Stratton and her sex appeal.
Yeah.
And I'm with you. There is a lot with Avery Schreiber that in the first half of the movie, he is the only cast member that has any sort of comedic timing. He is the only one that does something with the material, and that's what is really the annoyance with this movie is all the other cast just merely speaks their lines. They don't care about comedic timing. They it is so easy to miss a joke in this movie because nobody cares about the comedy, including our director. It's more about the sci-fi spectacle and the idea and the premise of it versus the execution of it. And that's where my eyes just kept rolling because I can see the comedic potential, but it's horrible direction and it's horrible acting with the exception of our Playboy model, Stratton, who does have glimpses of potential here. And that ended in tragedy before this movie released, or who knows what her future would have been after this movie released.
Well, it surprised me, her performance, because it starts off very monotone and robotic. Not like Vicky from Small Wonder robotic, but very underplayed. And then throughout the movie, as she starts developing emotions, there was like real character growth there. It's like, wow, I'm actually kind of impressed with what she's doing. She starts off very animatronic and then becomes a little bit more human. And it kind of follows that journey. But that's the trick of this movie, is that it's called Galaxina, but it's not really about Galaxina. She's kind of like a side piece to this weird space police story where you've got Avery Schreiber as the captain of this cruiser and his two hillbilly henchmen. It very much reminded me of Dark Star. That's the other trick this movie does, is it literally pulls from films like Dark Star, and then obviously it's got its Alien homage, it's got its 2001 homage, where instead of, space truckers or space scientists, we have space police. When it comes to the farce of it, though, I was actually kind of impressed by, maybe it was just the art direction crew and the set design and the builders. I feel like they did more for this movie than the script does, than the music does, obviously, and then do the performers do. Because there's some really clever makeup, there's some very clever special effects, and done by the right person in the right hands, this movie could have actually been funny. It could have been impressive. But instead, it feels like a bad Saturday Night Live sketch where the jokes don't land, but the visuals are entertaining. Perfect example. When they go to the space western planet, where it's like a western bar, which really was cool because a few things happen in that scene. Number one, we have a 3-breasted woman a decade before Total Recall. Call me impressed. We have some clever sight gags where they have a Spock character who has long pointy ears, except they face downwards. I thought that was really clever. Like little things like that where it's like, okay, there is some real fun stuff in here. It's just being bogged down by the nonsense script and lack of humor.
I won't give it any credit for 3 boobs because that's every
Lame.
guy's fantasy from
Lame.
every guy wants 3 boobs in a sci-fi movie. This one just had the balls to actually do it, and I'll give you that credit for them finally putting 3 boobs in a movie.
But Total Recall gets all the credit.
It does, because we actually see it and they take advantage of that moment.
Right.
Teenage boy, if you had a choice between Galaxina or Total Recall, every teenage boy is going for Galaxina because it takes advantage of the 3 boob concept. But
they'll be disappointed like I was because there wasn't enough of Galaxina.
There wasn't, and that has the Playboy model. That's what pisses me off about this movie. But when we get to the second half, the alien planet, the color grading is annoying. I thought I was having a stroke because we lose all the detail of this planet. It would have been better off just dimming the film, just changing the lighting and making us feel this movie has nothing to lose at this point. Why add color grading to this planet where it's hard to see what's going on? And I was uninvested at this point. I think it has clever ideas. I like the reverse Spock concept. I like the human uh, remains bar. I like all of that, but it ruins it because it's a distraction of what they try and do with the color tone. It takes it away because I found myself looking away from the screen because it was literally hurting my eyes. And that could be, in fairness, because of the quality that we saw or we viewed. But at the same time, this wasn't a good idea because even when we get to the biker gang scene, it took away from that. It took away from the rustic, different themes it's trying to do from, the Easy Rider kind of retro biker gang chase scene that we get. So there's a lot that takes away from the direction and the art direction here that could have made it something special, especially in the second half. But we care less about the characters as we get into it. We care less about the set design. We care less about all of that as the movie goes on because there is no real direction. And it's almost like the filmmakers gave up at this point because this is where the the transitions between shots are really sloppy because they're just hard cuts back and forth, and it's hard to follow where our characters are going. So to me, the second half really validates how horrible the production either was or how horrible the vision was with this movie, because I will agree that the first half gave it some potential. It gave it some
Mhm.
humor, but I'm going to give most of that credit to Avery Schreiber, who really does kind of hold the torch to this cast to say, this is the movie and this is the comedy we're going to do. But nobody follows it.
Agreed. Like once they go to the alien planet, and that's when I was saying it was like a bad Saturday Night Live sketch where they would mess with the color grading to make it feel like another planet. Like that's what it really feels like. Although there was some cleverness there too, especially the fact that like the biker gang, okay, that kind of felt like something Futurama would do. It's like a Mad Max biker gang in the future whose god is a Harley Davidson. That's funny. I thought that was hilarious. They don't do enough with it, but just the concept. Maybe that is this movie's biggest problem, and there's lots of problems, is that it wastes all of its best ideas. Like, it's a movie full of really novel concepts and a lot of funny ideas and thoughts, but they don't have the talent to create a story or a joke around it. So it's the same as like if someone's trying to paraphrase a comedy to you and they're just shooting you all the funny moments, but since they're not a funny person and they can't get the joke right, none of it's funny. That's how it feels. Avery Schreiber's delivery is very Groucho Marx-ish. I think performance-wise, physically, that's where I get the Dom DeLuise. And they save all the best one-liners for him as if he was like a Groucho Marx type character. And the shit they do to this guy, it's hilarious. Like he eats the alien egg, he gets an alien that falls in love with him. Hilarious. The fact that it opens up his cryo tube, so when everyone wakes up 10 or 20 years later, I forget what the amount of time was, I wasn't paying attention. He's grown like this long Rip Van Winkle hair where he almost looks like a Shar-Pei. Like he's hilarious looking, and he carries that the entire movie. Like I really wanted the movie just to be about him, and don't even call it about Don't even say it's about Galaxina. Yeah, I'm so all over the place with this movie because the movie's all over the place. That's the hardest part. Is like we've watched some chaotic movies, and we've been able to kind of like keep a coherent rapport about our conversation because we were able to follow plot structure. We were able to point out all the things with it. But this movie is such a mixed bag that I can't even like put a clear thought together to describe it. And that fascinates me. It fascinates me that this movie just boggles the mind that it's a sex comedy with no sex. It's got a Playboy bunny with no nudity. It is rated R, and there's like a lot of kind of like cheeky dialogue that would make it be rated R, but none of the rated R stuff is funny. It's like all there for just like cheap thrills. And there's money behind this. Like it's not the best special effects, but there's obviously money and design and attempt here. It almost feels like it is a money laundering scheme. Like someone made this movie to clean up their cocaine money. I really think that if we dug further into this movie, we'd find some dirt of why it is the way it is.
This was a cinematic hashtag of the late 70s, early 80s, because this one, I can imagine somebody waking up in a drunken stupor with ideas saying Star Wars, sci-fi, Playboy, sex comedy. And let's put it in a movie. It has a premise, but it has no idea of
Mhm.
execution. And that's one of those that you can tell it almost, you can visualize the screenwriter and our director writing the screenplay as this movie's going along, trying to figure out how he's going to include all the hot topics of this era, how he's going to integrate something that will put people into seats and make a solid trailer around a comedy about sex, sci-fi, and parody. And this is one, if it frustrates me more, is that this one proves that Avery Schreiber missed the comedy parody era, the big boom of the 90s and early 2000s, where he could have really made a name for himself. Because this one, I agree 110%. I would be more interested in almost a prequel of Captain Butts, I think his name is.
Cornelius Butt.
Cornelius Butts. So, because he is so just interesting to look at in his just his body language. So he nails the part, but he has no captain steering the ship. So to me, this is a movie of frustration because I can see potential here, but they needed somebody better at the helm and somebody better on the pen.
And I get it. Like, this definitely is a cult classic. There's people that would probably just say this is a great midnight movie. I would pass personally, but I see the ideas. Like, it definitely has the concepts to make a great midnight movie. I mean, Rhonda Shear is in this briefly, but it's got the DNA. It was meant for that kind of audience. It was not intended to be anything big budget and prestige worthy. This was a a space spoof. I still will stand by my idea that it was supposed to be a sex spoof, but they just took the sex out of it. Maybe because they thought they would get more kids into the theater to see it because it is a Star Wars 2001 parody. I don't know. But like I said, there are moments where it's like I really want to revisit and go back and watch those moments. I even think that it kind of has like some spawning pool stuff for Red Dwarf in the future. They have this crew that's down in the belly of the ship that's like the tech crew, the repair guys. And there's a guy who is like a space bat hybrid man. And he's got these little wings, but they don't do anything. And then like his cohort is like this old Chinese Confucius say kind of guy. You know, maybe not the most PC, but I thought those dudes were hilarious. And then they do nothing with them. They tease you for a second. You're like, okay, here's some comic relief that I'm going to see in the movie. And then they don't come back again until they're back in jail at the end of the movie. It's like, again, there's like all these novel concepts that don't have any fruition. And that's what is most disappointing about this movie. Because even if it was a terrible movie, if they really landed the ideas that these characters and these set pieces put into play, I'd have a different tune about this. But yeah, that's to me the biggest disappointment of this movie is that it is a waste of so many novel concepts and characters. It's just really sad.
I think this one shouldn't have been a midnight movie. I think this should be a new thing at a last call 1:30 in the morning movie when
To get
after
people
the
out.
10 shots kick in, you just fall asleep and just say you watched the movie. But there is one scene that I actually did find appealing, but at the same time, it is wasted by just the mere concept of showing these characters, and that's where they go to, I don't know, the kitty planet or the burlesque planet or whatever it
Mhm.
may be. And they spend a lot of time here just showing these prosthetic plastic masks and trying to say that's interesting with little dialogue. But this is where, Avery Schreiber really does shine, but there are some interesting elements here. It tries to do the Cantina band in a sexual way, and I don't know, it was cheesy, but at the same time, I was intrigued by what character and what poorly designed, ugly character or space alien we're gonna see next in this horror house at an alien planet. So I found that intriguing, but at the same time, it's the theme of the movie. It doesn't really do anything with it. It just kind of just goes limp and it just
Yeah.
stays there.
It's
So
just a set piece to for the sake of having a set piece. That scene is where Avery Schreiber has some of his best lines. That's like when he's full Groucho and just like dropping all these like sexual innuendo one-liners and all these alien chicks. Like it's hilarious, especially because he's all fuzzy looking still. Yeah, there's just it's got those little things in it that make it really interesting. I want to say the other part that I found really funny is that the fact that Galaxina has no sexual organs or things like that, but as she starts developing these emotions, you find out that she can buy like a vagina through a catalog and she can like upgrade herself through a catalog. And so this other police dude that she's been kind of like attaching herself to, they start planning this future of like how they're going to save up to buy her a vagina. I thought that was hilarious, right? And she delivers it well, but it's such a small part of the movie that it doesn't feel like it was deserved until the end. Like the last joke literally of the movie is about let's buy you a new vagina. again, novel concepts with zero execution.
Well, it's the latter. Okay, so we can order the vagina. So what about kids? We can order the kid.
We can know those
So
too. Yeah.
so it has some smart stuff just inserted, but again, they don't spend enough time with the good lines, and that's where the comedy timing really doesn't really work here, because you can tell there is more to this movie. You can tell there is more to the dialogue, but the second time I God, good lord, I had to watch, uh, we can tell I missed a bunch of one-liner jokes because it did the first viewing did not interest me, and it was so delivered in a way that it's just like reading a script at a table read, that
Mhm.
there's no timing. The second time actually paying attention to try and find something just out of this movie of substance or just fun, I picked up some other one-liners, and again, they are well written and there's some charm to them, but it's not well delivered, and I think that's the main problem. If it at bare minimum, if it was well cast entirely, I think the delivery could have been something. It could have helped this movie, not solved this movie, but helped this movie, but we don't get that here.
So the one last thing I'm going to say before we start diving into the critique of Siskel and Ebert was, as I was watching this movie, the two thoughts that I had is like, man, this would have been a lot better if it had been a Zaz movie like Airplane or Hot Shots. Or better yet, I would love to see what Mel Brooks would do with this movie. And then I realized, oh, wait, he already did this several years later. This was like a precursor to Spaceballs. Spaceballs is better, but the one thing that I've always had against Spaceballs is how sanitized it was. Because here was the guy that gave us History of the World Part 1 and Blazing Saddles, pretty hard R, explicit, humorous movies, and then he jumps right into Spaceballs, which is PG-13, and it's got its moments, but mostly it's a family movie. I would have loved to have seen what he would have done with like a more risque and cheeky and vulgar movie like this tried to be. Because I feel there's a lot of stuff in here that should have been in a Spaceballs type movie, or there should have been Spaceballs stuff in this movie. Because I really wanted to see it. And I was like, man, like Spaceballs really kind of did nail it, but it was missing some of the stuff that was in this one that did not have the proper execution. So I guess we'll just have to settle with Spaceballs. But yeah, that's the disappointment to me, is that this could have been handled so much better by a better director and a better writer, because there was some gems in this one. I'm not gonna lie.
The main difference is gonna be this one was a Star Wars copycat, just sexually exploited. Spaceballs knew that if it was gonna go full parody, kids are gonna go see it, and that was a safety net to it, is it had
True.
to be safe. But I agree with you. I would have loved to see Mel Brooks After Dark really attack a parody of Star Wars and just go all in.
Right. Oh, maybe like in another universe, in another dimension, in another multiverse situation, we would have had that. Okay, so I mean, it feels weird to say this, but let's hear what Siskel and Ebert had to say about Galaxina.
Let's go on to another little movie named Galaxina, a science fiction spoof inspired by Star Wars during its few good moments and by Captain Video during its many, many bad moments. Galaxina is about an intergalactic police cruiser patrolling the space lanes looking for criminals, and the crew is very bored most of the time. Their only distraction is Galaxina herself, a female robot who has been programmed not to have any emotions. I always love those scenes they have in movies like this where you see the spaceship. They want it to look like 2001 or Star Wars, and somehow it always winds up looking like a bar of soap that somebody carved with a kitchen knife.
So he said something really interesting in that. And that is like in its good moments. Therefore, he thought there was some good moments too. It wasn't just all hate for this movie. And Gene even has some in a second. One of the things that I think I was fascinated by his review of this is that just like us, he's talking about the spoof ability of this movie, how, you know, it's like Airplane's take on 2001 and Star Wars. And we did see Saturday Night Live do it. We also had a Hardware Wars back in the day. But this is like a critic's worst nightmare. It's a critic's worst nightmare. Like, this is the kind of thing that he wouldn't even want to write about. And here they are having to spend 4 minutes on the movie. And 4 minutes, I'm being generous there because 2 minutes of that 4 was a clip of like one of the least funny scenes in the movie. I still don't understand why bring this to the show. And them talking about it seems so forced and out of place. It's like they don't want to talk about it. They don't even know why they have this on the show.
It's also a little bit misleading because you have Gene chuckling in the background as Roger is giving his kind of subtle take on it. And you almost think this is going to go to a positive review because when usually the critics
For a
are
second,
laughing in the
yeah.
background, you're going to go positive with it. And this is where the special effects that they're going to contradict themselves later in the 80s is, you know, they do kind of bend a little bit on the parody aspect of the special effects. I mean, we even see it towards the end with the tires screeching with the spaceship trying to turn itself. But there are this is where I'm conflicted because I can kind of see where they're going, that there are moments in the beginning. There are some likability teasers, I would say, not likability aspects, but teasers. But this is one that they're starting to review with the look of the aesthetics. They're looking at where the looks are gonna entice an audience to really like this movie as a comedy aspect, and that's what I really don't like about the start of this review.
Yeah, because it's almost misleading on like what kind of film it actually is. And even when they finish the review, it is misleading to what kind of film it actually is because they make it sound a lot more fun than it actually is in practice. We talked about the fun moments. That doesn't mean that the movie itself is fun. You really have to work for those moments of laughter and comedy.
That was Dorothy Stratten at the beginning of that clip. She plays Galaxina, and she is the Playboy playmate who was murdered last year. And unfortunately, this movie didn't really give her a chance to do much more acting than you saw there. It's a predictable, dumb spoof, and even the talented Avery Schreiber can't do anything to save it.
Yes, it is a dumb spoof. And Avery Schreiber can't save it. I really have no arguments with that. And just the fact that like he is bringing up the murder and stuff like that makes me be even more sure that they were literally using that publicity to kind of maybe boost this show. I'm not going to say boost the ratings, but to get this movie on the show because this came out in 1981 and the film came out in 80, summer of 80. So they literally waited months and months before they actually put this onto the television program. Probably by the time this show aired, the movie was already out of theaters. Like I don't see this movie hanging around in cinemas for 6 months. So yeah, maybe there's more research to be had here, but it's just a very interesting idea why this is even on the show.
Well, I think there is a bunch of confusion because I think she was murdered 2 months after this was released to theaters, and then they pulled it extremely quick, and released it at a later date. So depending on when this review was done, I think it's depending on, and I don't know the
That's
true
true.
fact to
I
it.
don't know because there's so much conflicting information between
Right.
Wikipedia and then her bio. Yeah, it's weird.
And I think this is where it's really hard for a movie slash journalist to really take off his. I can be a skeptic and say this was to promote the show. And I said it earlier in this show is this is the reason why. But then I have to kind of look at our critics and our journalist point of view is it appropriate to acknowledge that this is a talent last performance, even though most of her films were in the 79, um, is it appropriate to really promote this film with her last role? And there could be vast opinions on this, but I think in a 2 minute to 3 minute to 4 minute snippet, I don't think it's appropriate. I think it's okay in an article where we can give more context to it. But in a 4 minute review, I think that's where it does feel a little cheap to kind of promote this movie.
Mhm.
I would talk about the actress on how she did because that is a movie review. That is something that you can really promote this movie based on the work that she did because that honors what she was trying to do is get out of the sex symbol, get out of the being the playmate of the year and become an actress. She used that to catapult herself into stardom. And I think that is more of a respect to this actress, this talent than just saying she died. So, and I do like the fact he acknowledges that she does a decent job, but I think there is more to it that needs to be separated from what's written and what's televised. And that's where I'm kind of really torn on it. And I'm not even sure if I really agree or disagree with what Roger's take is, honestly.
No, it is very interesting. Gene jumps in.
Did you notice at the beginning there were some very funny gags parroting other outer space movies like Alien and Star Wars? And I thought this movie was going to be, and maybe even wanted to be, what Airplane was to all the disaster films. And that's the way I'm judging this film. And it started out very funny, a few cute gags, and then nothing. No adventure. At least in Airplane, the spoof, they were smart enough to think, let's have an adventure story, will the plane get down? Here, nothing. There's no excitement. They're chasing some blue crystal around. It's stupid.
Maybe at the beginning when they were trying to sell this project, they had 6 good ideas, and they showed them to the backers, and they put all the 6 good ideas in the first 5 minutes, and then invention failed them.
The story is absolutely lost.
So pretty much exactly what I said. There was a list of good ideas that got just jumbled through the script. I'm not going to say they were all the beginning. The beginning did have like the funnier ones, but yeah, like just so many good ideas that did not get fleshed out, that did not get presented properly. And I agree with Gene 100%. The problem with the second half of this movie is that literally nothing exciting happens. I guess the adventure is supposed to be when they meet the biker gang that worships Harley Davidson, but that's dull. They don't even do anything with that. And even like its little, chase scene that's in front of a projector screen, yeah, it's intended to look silly and kind of, overcranked to speed it up, but it doesn't play that way. It's just all so dull afterwards. It's not silly or stupid enough to really be a good midnight movie. It's just dull. And I think that's the biggest problem of the movie is that if you honeypot us with the funny moments in the first 20 minutes and then just give us a slog of a movie for the next, how long was this movie? It was barely 90 minutes. Yeah, you are completely destroying all of the fun that you built with it, where it's no longer redeemable. Instead, I have to go through and like cherry pick the moments I thought were fun in this awful long movie.
You can always tell in a movie like this when you're trying to entice the fun factor and you don't have confidence in your work, especially with the biker chasing. You can always rely on good old William Tell to kind of in the background to really enforce that fun factor because it's familiar. And that's a cheap shot on it. And this is one that we see a lot of problems with comedies, and I've talked about it numerous times, where a writer is so excited on this joke or this idea that you want to write it down as fast as you can, put it in the first half of the movie because that's when you discovered this joke. And then by the time you get to the second act of the climax, you run dry. There is no spacing between the jokes of good ideas or good character development. Everything on a poor comedy is always shoved to the beginning. And it's a great idea as a hook, but you have to even it out to keep the audience going. There is nothing that happens in the second half that's really that interesting or funny. And I think that adds to, our frustration is we can see a little bit of the potential. We can see some of the fun factor, but there's nothing that rewards us for sitting through this piece of crap.
There is one thing that rewards us. If you sit through the piece of crap and actually watch the credits, there is like a voiceover captain's log entry that Avery Schreiber delivers that kind of recaps the whole movie. That might have been one of the funniest parts of the movie, is him just doing this crazy journal log entry over the credits of this movie. Like, I was like, am I really going to sit through these credits just so I can listen to the rest of this? Yep, I sure did. And it pissed me off even more because I was so ready to turn this off.
So just watch that. So
right, just watch
that's all you
need. Recap. The recap of the movie, yeah. Okay. This was such an interesting episode, man. It was an interesting movie to watch. Like, I don't regret watching it. Like, I you know me, I love to take movies off of my watch list. This has been in my watch list on Letterboxd for like 5 years. Obviously, it wasn't a top priority because we're watching it now in the, discoveries portion of this series. But I'm glad to at least say that I've seen it now and I can check it off my list and take it out of my watch list queue. And I got a few laughs out of it. I thought there was some clever stuff, but this movie is so utterly forgettable and I have no reason to revisit it. It is not shelf worthy, in my opinion. So yeah, that's how I feel about the film. How do I feel about the review? Well, it just feels like a weird review too, because again, how does a movie like this end up on the show? Like they give us zero enthusiasm or enlightenment to what kind of this movie this is, because it shouldn't have even been on the show in the first place. They're struggling to say anything relevant or eloquent about it at all. How do you write a non-scathing review of this film, and how do you translate that onto the TV without sounding like a total asshole? Like it's not a good movie for critics. Leave it alone. I looked up in Leonard Maltin. Leonard Maltin gave it a bomb, and it was like 3 sentences. It was like, Dorothy Stratten, former playmate, plays Galaxina, an android in the future. And that was it. Like, he didn't even bother to give it a critique. He just said it was a bomb and what it was about. I feel that's where it should have laid. Like, I don't think this was TV worthy. Therefore, I'm going to give that review from Gina D, because I got nothing out of it and it wasn't entertaining. If you're going to not like a movie, at least make it spicy and peppery and make me laugh about what a terrible movie it is. Don't be as boring and dull as the movie itself was. It was disappointing.
I'm not as nice as you, and I think we both know this, is I do regret watching this movie, and I will cringe every time I see this cover. This is a movie I will never want to see again because it is just absolutely horrible. And if I were to write a review on this, I would actually quote your critic is stupid. So I would give him points for that. When it comes to Roger's review, this one I am very disappointed because it gives this movie hope. It doesn't go all in on the flaws of this movie. And if I were to watch this back in the 80s and say, I'm going to give this movie a chance, I would be pissed off. If I bought a ticket to this movie, I would be pissed off. I'm going to say that they were genuinely okay with this movie because they must have had a good crowd late at night that really were drunk off their minds, that really did laugh as an audience reaction. I will give them credit, just assume that. But given the potential of this movie might be worth it, but it is kind of cheesy, I got to give him a solid 1.5 on it. It is absolutely kind of a misleading review, and it doesn't clarify what this movie is, which is a complete eye roll of a disaster.
You know what pisses me off about this movie? Because I looked this up just to see if people are buying it. There are multiple versions of DVD, Blu-ray, and VHS of this on Amazon and eBay, and they're all expensive. Like, they're all collector's items. It's one of those things where it's like one man's trash is another man's treasure. And I just don't understand it. And I'm not going to like invest that kind of money into buying one of these things. But again, it has its fans. And I don't want to yuck someone's yum, like I always say, but there's so many other movies that do this type of thing so much better. Spaceballs, for example. I think Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is another one where you can have like a satirical take on the sci-fi genre and sci-fi characters. But yeah, I mean, people are giving this 4 and 5 stars on Amazon. I can't, man. I just don't get it.
I respect other people's views. I always will, but this I can respect as a midnight to, in my opinion, a 1:30 in the morning movie where you have a group of people that when you get bored, you can start talking to other people and just use this as background noise. So, you know what? Everybody's going to have different tastes. I respect their taste, but you know what? This was not my cup of tea. And I tried to have fun with this movie. There is no way, even after a third view, I'll probably hate it more if I watched it again, that I'm going to like this movie.
Yeah, because it doesn't even fall into like the so bad it's good territory for me.
No.
Like it's just there's too much bad. Okay, interesting. Well, our advice, don't watch Galaxina unless you're have a penchant for self-torture and flagellation. There are some cool little, wink and nod moments to things that were come in the future. Like I said, 3 boobs. But it's not worth digging through the 90 minutes of this movie to find those moments. Go on YouTube and just look up best clips or best lines, because there are some funny lines, but they're not good or funny enough to sit through the whole movie for, in my opinion.
Just watch Total Recall and pause a 3 boob scene for an hour and a half. You'll be more entertained.
Sounds great to me. I'm going to do that right now after the show. Okay, so that's 2 strikes, man. Blink and this. I thought this was a great idea when we were like, hey, we're going to watch movies we've never heard of, never seen. It's not faring out so well for us. So maybe Justin's pick for next week will dig us out of this trench of despair. He is bringing 1979's Yanks, starring Richard Gere and directed by John Schlesinger. I'm a big John Schlesinger fan, and I never heard of this movie. I got on Letterboxd. No one's heard of this movie either. It literally had like 100 reviews, and like only 2 or 3 people that are in my friends list has seen it. So we'll see. Maybe Yanks is going to dig us out of this pit that we've gotten ourselves into.
I haven't seen it yet. I'm excited to see it, and I'm just hoping, 3 times the charm. We gotta have a good one coming soon.
So, everyone, thank you for watching, listening. Please jump onto our audio channel and our YouTube channel. Give us a like, subscribe, rate, review, 5 stars, all that good stuff. You can find me over at thecultworthy.com. You can find Justin and the Movie Wire over at
themoviewire.com.
Let's pray for a better experience next week, and I'll see ya.
See you next week.